Hey everyone, it's Chaz. Welcome back to another video. We're going to be doing some Advent of Code, and today we're going to look at Day 2, Part 1. So let's get started. All right, so where we left off was Day 1, Part 2. We already finished this puzzle, so I'm just going to go back to the Advent calendar, click on Day 2. And they give us another nice story with the elves. Basically what it comes down to this time is we are tracking scores for a rock, paper, scissors tournament. We see down here we're given what's called a strategy guide, a set of inputs. And they tell us that the first column represents what your opponent is going to play. A means rock, B means paper, C means scissors. And then we make the assumption that the second column represents what we should play in response. X representing rock, Y for paper, Z for scissors. They tell us down here that there are 2 different scores that you get in each round. You get a score for the shape that you select, 1 point for rock, 2 points for paper, 3 points for scissors. And then you get a second score for the outcome of the round. So 0 points if you lost, 3 points if it was a draw, and 6 if you won. And then they ask us, if you follow the strategy guide, what is your total score? So they give us a very short sample input right here. So I'm just going to right-click, copy. I'm going to go into my resources folder. I'm just going to do it in Explorer. I'm just going to create a new text document. We'll call it test Day 2, and I'm just going to paste the strategy guide here. Save, close. And then I'm also going to, I've already done Part 1 and Part 2, so I'm just going to have to scroll to the bottom and get my text file right here. I'm just going to right-click, save as. And I just want to keep the same naming convention, so I'm just going to do input day 02. All right, now let me jump back into IntelliJ. So IntelliJ is already updated with my input for rock, paper, scissors and my test. I still have my Day 1 class open. I'm just going to close it because I don't need it anymore. When I started doing Advent of Code, I didn't really have any sort of system for doing this like efficiently. So what I do when it's time for me to set up a second day, all I do is I just do a comment and just comment out the day that I don't need. And then I just start with a new one. So I'm going to need a Day 2 class. So let's right-click, choose New Java Class. I'm going to keep my same naming convention. And I know that I'm going to need to calculate scores. So I already know I'm just going to create my method, public int get score. Just like in Part 1, I'm going to take the string file path, which is going to be my text file. And this time what I did so that I didn't have to rewrite my scanner code, I added a second parameter, which is just the part that I'm working on. So now my method will take a file path and it will take a part, whether I'm working on Part 1 or Part 2. All right, and I'm now going to set up this method to accept my text file, to read my text file, and then also to return an output. All right, so here's my file object called file equals new file, and then it's going to take the file path, which I will pass in from the main method. And you can see the file and scanner classes are red. It's because I just haven't imported them yet. And I could see that I accidentally used a minus sign instead of an equal sign, so fix that. And because I'm attempting to scan a file, I have an unhandled exception, so I just need to add that to the start of the method. There's my throws file not found exception. And then I said I would create an integer variable that I can return as my output. This way I don't get any compile errors and I can start working on the main method. Right, so I created a total score int, and then I just set it to 0 and immediately returned it. Now I won't get any compile errors. Let me jump back into the main method. So I created my Day 2 class, so let me make an object for it. Right, Day 2 2022, I named the object Day 02 equals new Day 02 2022. I'm going to set up an integer variable to hold the result of my method. Right, so I created my int variable score part 1. It's going to hold the result of my get score method. I need to pass in a file path. I'm just going to copy and paste the source path from day 1 and just change the 1 to a 2. And then I type comma 1 because this is going to be the get score for part 1 of day 2. And then I just print out that variable. So right now, all I'm doing is returning a 0. Everything should run. All I have to do is hit run and I should just get a 0. Yep, there it is. So now we have to take the data that we're bringing in from that text file through the scanner and find a way to actually use it in our program. So let's do that now. We're going to do while scanner.has next line. Right, well, while the scanner has a next line, we're going to store the contents of that next line. We can do it 2 different ways. If I look at my input, so each line looks like it's a character, a space, and then a character. So one thing I can do is I can create an array of these characters. Really, technically, it would be a string array, and split using the space. That would create an array where the index 0 would be the first letter of the line, and index 1 would be the second letter of the line. I'm not going to do it that way this time because I use the split method a lot in future days, so I want to do it a little differently this time just to mix it up. So what I'm going to do instead is just use the char@at method of the string class. So what I'm going to do is store this entire line as a string, and then I could see that they're all in the same format. So the character at index 0 is always one of the letters that I need, and the character at index, not index 1, but index 2, is the other character that I need. So that's how I'm going to get these values. So first of all, let's do a string input. So my string, which I named input, is just going to be whatever I get out of the next line through the scanner. And now I'm going to save those 2 characters that are in that string. All right, so I created 2 chars. One is named opponent, and that's the input string, the character at index 0. And I created a second char called u, which is that same input, but this time the character at index 2. And if I wanted to do some debugging and test to make sure that I'm actually getting my input correct, I might do something like all right, so I already ran it, but this is what it looks like. I used a printf just because when I debug, I kind of like to throw everything into the same line, so I like to use printf instead of println. Printf, if you've never used it, it just takes these things called format specifiers. So in this case, I'm specifying that a string is going to appear here, and actually, I'm thinking about it, I don't need to use a string, I can use a character. So I'll use C for char. But you could see my output here, like, I know this is the bottom because I'm returning that 0 from over here. So if I wanted to make sure that I'm accepting my input file correctly, I can just look over here, maybe scroll all the way to the bottom of it. And yeah, it looks like everything matches. Right? It's like a bunch of Y's in a row. And same thing here. So I have correctly taken my text file and read it and stored it as the variables that I need. I'm pretty confident that I'm not going to have to debug the input again, so I'm just going to delete that line. And now that I've done everything to actually read the input, I'm going to start coding the actual logic for part 1. To make my code a little cleaner, I am going to just create an additional method just for part 1. So it's going to look something like this. All right, so I created an if statement saying if the part is 1, so back in my main method, if I specify part 1 in my get score line, then it will only run this one line here, which will take my total score and then add the game result, which is a method I haven't created yet. And I'm passing in the character that I read for the opponent and the character that I read for you. And then when the scanner is finished reading the entire text file, I should close it and then return my total score. All right, now I'm going to create my game result method. All right, so I made it private. Doesn't really matter, but This is the only class that's ever going to call this method, so there's no reason to make it public. It takes a character called opponent and a character called you. I just use the same variable names from the getScore method. So going back to the problem, it said that I get 2 scores in each round, and the first score is only based on the shape that you select. So that's the U char from the code that I wrote. So let's code that first. I need to assign 1 point for rock, 2 points for scissors. I'm sorry, 2 points for paper, and 3 points for scissors. So first things first, I need to actually create those 2 int variables just to store the number of points I get for my choice and the number of points I get for I think it's the result of the rock, paper, scissors game. So let me just create those real quick. All right, so I just created a variable choice score, which will represent the score I get for the choice that I made. And then I created a win score because that will represent the number of points I got for who won. But I'm going to do the choice score first. I'm going to assign the choice score using a switch. And so a switch, if you've never used it before, it's very similar to an if block, like a series of if and then if else, if else, if else. So when you know you're going to have multiple if else statements, sometimes it's easier to read if you just use a switch. So in a switch, you provide cases. And for me, the 3 cases are going to be, what was it? The X, Y, and Z. Is that right? Let me check the problem. Okay, yeah, it says it here that the second column is what you should play in response. So X is rock, Y is paper, and Z is scissors. So my 3 cases are going to be the character currently being held by this variable U, which could only be X, Y, or Z. All right, so here are my 3 cases. When U contains the character X, that would be selecting rock, and my logic will go right here. For now, I just typed break because in a switch, what'll happen is in my case, whichever letter is currently being stored by the variable U, let's say it's the letter X, it'll find the case X and it'll run whatever I type here, like if blah, 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 it doesn't matter. But if this break statement were missing, it would actually keep running code until it sees a break. And if it doesn't see a break, it'll just run this entire block. So it's nice if, say, you want case Z to only run one specific thing, but then you want case Y to run 2 things. You want it to run its own logic and case Z's logic. Then you would just omit the break, and it'll just continue running everything below it. And then one last thing, it's usually a good idea to provide a default case. And the default case is what will run if, for whatever reason, your variable contains none of these. If I read my input file incorrectly and there isn't an X, a Y, or a Z, it'll run whatever's in my default. And I could just type it out, but actually in IntelliJ, it will give you a little thing here. If I click on the switch, little light bulb appears and it gives me the option to just insert it. So I'm just going to click that, and it's doing exactly the same thing as if I had just typed the default case. So in this case, it's throwing an illegal state exception, and it's giving me some information. It tells me unexpected value, and then it tells me the character that it received that was not one of these 3. So as an example, if I just take this first one right here, and instead of the letter Z, I do like W, and then run it, then I'll get a missing return statement because I forgot to put a return statement in this game result. So let me take care of that. Looks like green is the end, so that's this one. And we're just going to return choice score plus win score. And now if I run it, you see I get my illegal state exception. It says unexpected value W because in my input, I have a letter W. What letter was this? Hopefully I can just undo it. All right, we're good. All right, now I set up my 3 cases for the choice score. So what did we say? I think it was 1 point for rock. Yeah, 1 for rock, 2 for paper, 3 for scissors. So if I chose rock, I should get 1 point for it. So we assign choice score value 1. For paper, I'm supposed to get 2 points. And for scissors, I'm supposed to get 3 points. Now, if I want, I can just test this real quick. Instead of using the input text file, I'm going to use the test file because it's much smaller, much easier to calculate in my head. So I'm going to go to my main method, and instead of input day 2, I'm just going to change this to test day 2. And so what will happen is I'll get 1 point for X, 2 points for Y, and 3 points for Z. There is 1 of each, so I should get 6 points. I haven't coded any logic for the first column, so I should only get 6 in total. That's what gets returned up here. This will return 6 as the total score. And then my main method takes that 6, puts it in this variable, and then prints it. So when I run this, I should get 6. And there it is. Now I need to code my logic for the result. So I'm actually going to put that in my switch cases because you're going to get different points for the result depending on whether you chose rock, paper, or scissors, because rock only beats scissors and it loses to paper. And then obviously it draws with itself. So what I'm going to do, since the win score will be 0 if you lose, and I've already initialized it as 0, I am not going to put a losing situation in my code. I'm not going to put a line here for what happens when the opponent selects paper. And it says here that the opponent is A, B, C, and then A is rock, B is paper, and C is scissors. Since B is paper, I am not going to include a line for choice B in this code. I'm only going to do A and C. So let's see what that looks like. All right, so the opponent A, and I'm going to keep losing track of this. So really quick, I'm just going to add another comment. All right, so now I can keep track of this. So A is rock. Rock ties with rock, so I should get 3 points for that. And what I'm doing here, this is called an enhanced if statement. So if I'm only running one instruction with my if statement, then I don't actually need the brackets. So in this case, I'm only running one thing in this if statement. I think technically it's slightly slower than if I did if else, but don't quote me on that. But I'm doing it because it's easier to read. So what it's saying is if the character that represents my opponent is the letter A, then this is a tie and I should get 3 for my win score. And then I need to also include scissors. I don't need to include paper because paper will be a 0. And since my win score is already 0, there's no reason for me to reassign it to 0 again. All right, so this is saying that if my opponent chose scissors and I chose rock, then I should win and get 6 points. Now I'm going to do the same thing for paper and scissors. All right, so I'm all done. Let's just quickly go over what this is. So if my opponent chooses, first of all, for case Y, when I choose paper, if my opponent chooses rock, then I should beat rock and get 6. But if my opponent chooses paper, it should be a tie, so I'll get 3. And then case Z, I chose scissors. If my opponent chose, paper, then I should win and get 6. But if my opponent chose scissors, then I should tie and get a 3. Like here in this first one, it's A and then Y. So I chose Y, which is paper. I get a score of 2. My opponent chose A, so I should win and get 6. So altogether, I should get 2 plus 6, which I return here, 2 plus 6, and I should get 8. When you take all 3 of these together, according to the problem, I should get a total of, it says here, 15. So let's see if I get 15 when I run my code. Yeah, 15. Perfect. So now let's switch out my test input for the whole thing. All right, so there's my main input, and now when I run it again, I get 13,005. I've already done this problem, so let's see if I got 13,005. Yes, I did. Puzzle answer is 13,005. All right, so that's going to be it for part 1. Part 2 will come out soon, so stay tuned. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you will find out when that video actually comes out. Leave a comment if you did anything different and you want to help me out, because I would love to see it. And yeah, that's all. I'll see you next time.